My client wants it to be put right across on record that he has never, ever done anything on behalf of the president, no deals on behalf of the president, no activities on behalf of the president. His relationship with the president of Zimbabwe, His Excellency President Mnangagwa, is one of principal and urgent, one of superior and subordinate, and he has that relationship. Thirdly, in that regard, my client wants to make it very clear that he has no relationship whatsoever with members of the president, his family. He only has a relationship with the president, which is a formal, professional relationship. He wants me to tell you that he has never met with the First Lady. He actually has never met the First Lady of Zimbabwe because his relationship is with the president. That must be clear. Then I want to read a passage here from my notes with my client, which we would want the whole world to understand. My client, who is Ambassador Uebert Angel, wants it known that he has not been, has never been, and will never be involved in any criminal activity whatsoever. More particularly, he would like it to be stated that he has not been involved in any form of gold dealing or gold smuggling, nor has he ever engaged in money laundering by whatever name it may be called. So the insinuations in the Al Jazeera documentary are wholly baseless. He also wants it known that in his work, immediately after his appointment, he went to do some work, and that work is within the first 6 months of his work is when these issues that have come in the Al Jazeera documentary came about. Now I want to go to that aspect, but this general aspect about the statement I have made, he has never been involved in any. He holds a diplomatic passport, yes, but at the same time he has a British passport. In all his work, he has used his British passport. So he travels around the world as an ordinary holder of a British passport. It is only in 3 instances where he has used his diplomatic passport to travel to 3 countries in Africa, which meant that a decision was taken with the intelligence authorities that my client would play along. He would not cancel his interactions with these persons. He would meet them and meet them as if he was going to make arrangements for them to meet the president and for them to be able to do investments in Zimbabwe. So it was in the context of a national intelligence operation. Zimbabwe wanted to gain intelligence out of it, wanted to see how far its enemies could go and what their agendas were. And these were issues to do with that. That is the context. Now, I should emphasize at this stage that even as I'll give you a few more details in respect of that, so that I explain what my client is saying in respect of what is coming out of the documentary, that ordinarily these things are not told to the world. These things are not told to the public. But because of the intensity of the Al Jazeera documentary and its implications on the integrity of the operations of governmental systems in this country, my client felt obliged that he has a moral obligation at least to give an indication of what was going on. So in terms of then playing along, we want to stress that my client says even as they were going to play along, there was also somewhat a possibility that these persons were not what the intelligence thought they were. So you would find that in some respects, there would have been some element of doubt at some interactions as to are these people what we think they are and we are playing along, or they are genuine. So there will be actions by my client in the documentary which might not be consistent with the explanation that he was playing along and acting along. This is the point that we wish to make. There was some element of doubt in some respects, but largely and almost mainly the actions in the documentary are consistent with a classified national intelligence operation which was meant to see how far they would go. Now, what then happens? So in that documentary, all the things that are said, no one was phoned. I'll give that as an example. So there was no call to the First Lady, for example. There was no call to Henrietta Lushwaya. These were decoys that were put in an intelligence operation. But what you see in the documentary is merely playing along. There was never a time, never, according to my clients, where people were requested to pay money to see the president. That is false. It would have been part and parcel of a process. There was never a time when the First Lady was called to be able to say that they'll fly jets and so forth to carry gold, or any time that Henrietta Lushwaya was phoned. Every part of the process you see, it is part of that aspect which comes in. If there are a few instances that are not directly consistent with that, I've watched them, I've discussed them with my client to get an explanation as to what would say. It could simply be the manner in which the acting along was done. Now, I then want to conclude and say that I'll read this portion of what is coming out. As part of a nefarious agenda to undermine the economic interests of Zimbabwe, including particularly putting the president in the light that is portrayed in the documentary, these persons sought to use Ambassador Uebert Angel as a basis to then carry out that agenda. And the National Intelligence Framework decided that they will play along to see how far it would go. They have already done that, and sufficient information has been obtained as a result of that exercise. And this belongs to the wealth of information that the National Intelligence Framework here has. I have not been asked to get into the details, but I've been given the authority to answer questions that you might want to ask